Good morning, Michael.
Morning, Donald.
Thank you for having us here. This is just a casual conversation and also for our participants as well as our guests to get to hear more about Barefoot's successful journey. We'd like you to introduce yourself and speak more about Barefoot and where you have come.
All right. Thank you for having us, and we're always proud to be part of HEAL's program. My name is Michael Kwizera. I'm the Director of Strategy and Partnerships at Barefootlaw. What is Barefootlaw? We're a not-for-profit organization founded and run by Ugandans. We're based here in Uganda. And the work that we do is to provide access to justice and law so that people can solve the justice needs. Our fundamental belief is that access to justice is the route for just, equitable and fair societies to develop and thrive. And that's our goal. Our mission is to make sure that society has access to justice and everyone can be treated equitably and fairly. We've been here since 2012. We were founded in 2012, started officially in 2013. And our journey has been a whirlwind journey, growing from a small idea in one room to an organization recognized locally and internationally for the work we do in access to justice and pushing the envelope on what innovation can do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You talk about access to justice, and these are core pillars of HEAL. Can you just describe, firstly, how you said you had a small idea in an office? How did that journey come about? Who came up with the idea? How did you guys scale to reach to where you are right now in terms of the different organizations that crossed your path? And especially talk about that earlier journey with HEAL.
The idea started by our founder, Gerald Abila, while at law school. Actually, the story is he was at a court session during a school training, and there was a gentleman who was unable to answer a very simple legal question, and as a result of that, his case got determined without him really knowing. Yeah, and from time to time, providing legal posts on very important things that people take for granted or didn't know. And that then generated questions, and people began to interact with the law, and many of them were realizing a lot of their rights were being infringed, or they didn't have knowledge of what was going on. But we were aware from the start. After that, Gerald and a couple of other people joined together and started doing this as a more concerted effort.
Yes.
And so we began in a really tiny room with just about 4 people, somewhere in Bukoto, actually.
Yes.
And all we did was sit down, write posts, put them up on Facebook, get questions, answer them, until the name Barefootlaw came into existence. We formally registered it as a not-for-profit organization in 2013, and the journey since then has been a whirlwind. We started out really just doing question and answer and posting, but quickly began to see the gravity of what legal issues are in the public. And so people came in, people called and asked to have interviews, people called to ask if they could be represented. And so we quickly realized that it was going beyond just giving people information, and we now needed to drive towards some sort of system that provided this regularly and consistently. And that journey meant that we started to become a bit more public. We grew from a few hundred people liking our page to a few thousand in a very short period within 2013. And by 2014, our work was already being recognized here in Uganda. Yes. The Uganda Communications Commission had the ASIA Awards at the time. And we were nominated for and won the ICT for Development Award. And that was instrumental in the work we were doing. It gave us validation that we were not doing something in vain, that there were more than just a few people who liked our work, but in fact, we were probably scratching the surface on something related to access to justice. The innovation journey grew quickly from there on. Beyond just doing this on Facebook, we began to build digital tools because it was our firm belief at that time that digital would play a strong role in the way people access justice. So we quickly moved into adding other platforms. We went into, we put up our website, we put up all the content that we needed. From the questions that we were generating, a lot of content was requested 4 people needed to see templates, so we did that immediately. And the early shape and form of our website and content were not the prettiest, I must say, but ultimately we're just responding to the need and trying as hard to push the envelope. So it was not just people asking regular questions about their rights. We also started getting responses from micro, small, and medium enterprises, and they were asking business-related questions. And that spawned another part of our program, which is our support for micro, small, and medium enterprises, and that's the nexus into which HEAL comes in, because as a result of getting this program started, we participated in the Innovating Justice Challenge as Barefootlaw, focusing on that, and we went all the way to the end, emerging second overall for the Innovating Justice Challenge East and West Africa. But yes, emerging second from the competition of the Innovating Justice Challenge from HEAL. And once we got that, it was a huge stepping stone for us in what doors could open up for access to justice and the work we did. We realized that even though what we're doing was novel, there were other thinkers at a global scale that were also trying to unearth the way innovation can change access to justice. And that's been our journey with HEAL. It's a relationship that we're extremely proud of. We're friends beyond just partners. We know quite a bit of the team, including you. But that relationship has materialized into an extraordinary source of learning, opening doors and unearthing opportunities. And I think that's where we've grown with other partners and what we've done with bigger opportunities together with HEAL. I think that instrumental part of becoming Innovating Justice winners, second runner-up, that played a crucial role in spurring us forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. From the numbers that I've seen and from the good work you guys have been able to do, I've noticed you have provided over 700,000 people with legal services and provided them with that information. You seek to make access to justice and law readily available to 50 million people across Africa in 2030. That's a very ambitious target. Please explain in short how you aim to achieve that.
Thank you for that question. It's an ambitious target, and if I may paraphrase, go big or go home. We're really here to make sure that this is not just something that a few people benefit, but ultimately it can make a change. And defining what our goal was, I bring back HEAL because this came from one of the programs we had with them, tailor-made training, in which we could define our purpose clearly and our goals clearly. And so we arrived at that after some meticulous planning and calculation. So it's ambitious, but it's well within our sights. And to achieve that, it's going to come back to the root of who we are. We are heavily innovation and technology based. We know that that is going to be a scaling factor, a key scaling factor into where we get. And I will talk about some of the things on how we see that happening. But ultimately, in pushing the envelope, we have learned a few things and failed. Technology in and of itself is not an end to finding access to justice. It is a facilitator. And innovating around it is how best you can use innovation and technology as a combined mix or even individually to get to where you're going. So our goal is to scale not just within Uganda, because we want to scale broadly and deeply. So in terms of breadth, going across Uganda, going across the region, and definitely in several parts of Africa. But in terms of depth, we want to go to even the unreached communities. So not just people who have access to technology, the regular urban dwellers who have access to mobile phones, but we're also pushing technology at its basic limits, utilizing aspects like SMS, voice, and for areas where there's even no connection to this kind of technology, we're deploying a program called the NODES program, which has community-based advocates, people who can provide access for legal support even to communities where there's no technology. So we see this as an enabler, and we're pretty confident that the scale up to 50 million across Africa is well within our sights, especially with partners, not just alone.
Okay. You talked about innovations. You also talk about scale. This needs a certain level of sustainability. This needs Barefoot to be at a certain level of self-sustenance.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourselves in achieving this ambitious goal and the current rate at which Barefoot needs to be self-sufficient?
Yeah. And that's a tough question, but it's also a very brilliant question, especially for non-profits like ours and in a sector like access to justice. A lot of times sustainability, self-sustaining might be viewed as being able to have the revenue to do the work that you want to do, especially at scale. We view sustainability differently. First of all, we see sustainability as being able to bring down your costs radically. And we are proponents of the idea that sustainability means, can you make your program affordable at scale such that it can then attract the kind of support that can provide it even when it's free to the public. And that's where technology comes in. That's the role it's playing for us. It's a scaling strategy, but it's also a sustainability strategy. Second of all, we leverage partnerships. And we know that in access to justice, our scaling strategy involves working with government institutions, non-profit actors, and other legal aid service providers. What brings this glue together is technology that can leverage different facets so that ultimately at scale, it's not really how much revenue you have to get to the next beneficiary, but what resources you've put together such that the next 10 and the next 1,000 can get it at an incrementally lower cost. And I think for us to scale out to that level, what we're doing is focusing on partnerships and building the right technology and connections to get there.
Thank you. I think that's very interesting. It's an approach that I find not so many non-profits are looking at, because a lot of times donors are pushing you to be self-sustaining in terms of revenue generating. But from your submission, you're looking at reducing costs and leveraging people and partnerships. And I think it's a key one. It would be interesting to see how you guys scale. On that note, again, I go back to the 50 million people that you're trying to provide access to justice. One of the key success journeys for any enterprise or any non-profit is the team. You mentioned earlier in your submission that you were a team of 4. If you can elaborate more, in that early journey, I'm sure you're all volunteering. You weren't getting paid. How did you keep each other motivated? But in your same submission, currently as you scale, what is your core leadership structure like? And what is your current, how do you keep your group motivated?
All right. Yeah, that's also, all of them are brilliant questions, I guess. Yeah, initially, we were just a team of, everybody was a volunteer. In fact, many people were part-timing or even just, picking from their own resources to make this work. Now, not in vain, but in a way in which we're confident that what we're doing could eventually get to what we wanted to do. And if I can digress, a lot of times for many people, the continuum is design a program and then find funding to get it done. In the early days, what we realized is that results will speak for themselves. And so in the early days, even as a small team, what we worked on was to show what results we can provide with the little resources we had. Our first real grant was, I think, when we won the ASEA Awards in 2014. There was more than a year and a half of operating without any money in the account. But by then, we had results enough to become the winners of the ASEA Awards. So that meant that the management team around that, I think, first of all, the pillar of all of this is you have to have the clarity of your goals. Once you have the clarity of goals, then you can design a structure that can achieve them. So right now we think we're a very flat organization. We are, by and large, top down is maybe 1 or 2 or 3 levels of the organization. That allows us to be really flexible and nimble in the way we respond to challenges, in the way we respond to our resource constraints, but also in terms of how we want to achieve our goals. So I think when you're asking what's the core management team like, the structure, it's very flat, but we work across directorates that focus on which part of the goal we're getting to. So we have 50 million across Africa by 2030. There's a time bound, there's a financial part of it, there's a service provision in terms of legal and the technology to make it work. And that's all the directorate clusters that come together, of course, plus administration. We keep it flat because ultimately that's how efficiency for organizations ought to be, but also it allows us the flexibility to respond to the environment we're in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you say a big word, which is something that I guess all non-profits, but also many social enterprises try to find that balance, and that is fundraising, right? I like the fact that you actually said you guys bootstrapped before you won the awards because you were actually focusing on results rather than building something that will depend on money. I think that's a very key take-home point. In regards to your fundraising efforts, as once again, I'll go back to the ambitious goal of 50 million, which I know is going to be achievable. What has worked for you guys in your style of fundraising? Of course, feel free to share what you can share.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to share.
And what hasn't worked, so that some of the social enterprises and non-profits that we have, part of our program, and some of the alumni in the same Hill program can learn from and pick from. What has worked for you guys in terms of your fundraising efforts?
Yeah, fundraising is a challenge, especially when internally as an organization you don't have very many avenues in which you raise self-generated revenue, and yet the goal you have is to keep doing more work. And it's the first thing is to understand what you're trying to do and for whom that is valuable. So I think many times in fundraising, the things that didn't work in the start, I can say, was looking for the best donor or the biggest donor or the person who has a big budget to give out to organizations you think you're similar to. But many times people, what we discovered is people invest in value. So the value that you create, it has to resonate with whoever is going to come and support you. And I think in fundraising, it's seeing where that mix is. And once you have that approach, you will realize that it's not necessarily going for the biggest or the most bright or the most visible, but you find that somebody has a keen interest in the kind of work that you're doing and that you can nexus together. But that's just one of them. The second one is developing a really, really strong gut that is patient. Because fundraising is not about requesting, it's about people appreciating what you're doing. So we've learned how to work long strides over time with the organizations that we need to get support from. Appreciating that failure is absolutely part of the story, and not doing things rapidly just to fail so that you can rack up a board of failures. But every time you fail, you have to absorb everything within the process, asking and learning why a partnership doesn't work out or why it didn't work, and integrating it into your work. Maybe what has worked, I think in terms of, first of all, developing internally a structure that understands fundraising. Sometimes it's the role of leadership, but sometimes it becomes an independent role of a person within your organization. So we have a director of development now. We have an entire development team, and the role there is to work towards showcasing what work we're doing and what our vision is, and developing the relationships that can ultimately become funding and support programs. So you have to make a concerted effort towards fundraising. It's not just 100 emails a day done.
Can I ask, that team, the development team, what is the percentage of the HR costs to your organization?
Without giving numbers?
No, that number, percentages.
I'd say, because we're a very flat organization, I'll give you a fraction of what it is at the directorial level. So we have a director of development. So across 6 directorates of the organization, so one of them is development, but 2 of those and the executive director are part of the development team. So that's easily a third of your top management concentrating on development as one of the key roles.
Individually as one of their key roles.
Key role.
Okay, so it's a KPI. They are. I'm trying to understand this in the sense that.
And we can reboot.
And I like, because you said in your team you're nimble and you actually cross-function, right? So that means that you have allocated hours, man hours, on the development aspect of Barefoot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can clarify for you that. So the director of development, for example, their entire job is fundraising work.
Okay.
But even across the different directorates, there's different people who have set time and volume of their time across the day and the month that is about development. So in total, about a third of the top management will contribute towards the development effort.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's very key because a lot of times we've realized that founders tend to be very keen on doing the fundraising themselves, but it's quite a challenge and it's quite a difficult one. Though you had, as we mentioned, even when we had one of our guests last week speak to you guys, it was like it's a founder's job, but I think also delegating increases the volume, right? And then most likely the founder then just sees what really abides mostly to the mission and vision of the founding team. In that aspect, one thing that really I wanted to just pick on before I ask you the final question is at Barefoot you have back to your team, you have a lot of volunteers and a lot of lawyers who come and work with you. In regards to their approach, when someone comes and asks, a key stakeholder for Barefoot is the people you're giving access to justice. Do you guys at any one point think, just thinking out of the box, do you at any one point think that the volunteers that come to work with you or that partner with you are actually using Barefoot to begin their legal careers? Is it something, do you measure that? Do you actually measure that opportunity for those, like providing the opportunity for jobs in preparation for jobs or something of that sort?
One of the key resources in terms of human resources are volunteers. Sometimes you have employees and also contractors. And for a long time in the beginning, a lot of our work, first of all, was fully volunteer, and then slowly grew into some part-time employees, and then volunteers, and then quite now the bulk of it is people who are dedicating this as their full-time and their employees. But we do have a lot of volunteer support as well. And it's not so much positioned as an opportunity for them to start their careers. I think what we do is we present an opportunity for people to learn, but also to bring their skill set to good use, ultimately supporting their own personal career growth. Now, what they do with their career growth as volunteers is entirely up to them, and we'll support them, whether it's a students program where we have some who go through a volunteer program here, students, and by the time they're done, hopefully they've been exposed to the right kind of access to justice issues that are on the grassroots, and they can decide where they're going. Those who have worked from time to time within our digital departments can then see where innovation is as well. So I think it's about creating it as a fertile ground for them to improve themselves. It's the individual who gets developed, and what they do with that learning, if it has been valuable, is entirely up to them, and how we can support them on that journey is we are open and happy to do that.
Do you measure it?
No, we do not measure it in terms of where they go after that. What we do is...
Yeah, measuring, I mean in terms of knowing the amount of people who pass through the hands of Barefoot.
Yeah, we have a very robust measurement in terms of our churn, in terms of our staff. We know how many people have come in and gone, especially those who provide volunteer time. We track that as well. But what I can say right now, we have a significant proportion of who we have now as permanent people, because now we're at the point where the spaceship has to kind of lift off. So you can't just be fixing parts now. You really have to have a team that's on the journey for the long haul. Yeah, but it's an important part of the team we have as well. Volunteers support our work, and we measure how many have come in and gone. Yeah.
So in terms of your process, if I was to lift, I'm thinking if you're going to go to Nairobi, or if you're going to go to Lusaka, or if you're going to go to Zambia, or are you lifting Barefoot as is and then placing it into these areas, or are you working through sort of like a franchise or partnering? Explain. Do you know how you're going to do that?
Yeah. We understand that the model, by and large, that we have developed now works across Africa. but it's more of a, it's not a plug and play solution.
Yes.
It's getting into the community and learning how this model can be tweaked to work. Again, if you look at the binary areas of our work, it's innovation, scale, and simplified digital solutions and legal services. So it's innovation, scale, digital solutions, and legal services. That small box goes into whichever country it is, and how we plug that in matters. We're already looking at scaling into Kenya. We have a partnership now with Strathmore University, and our role in this partnership is to build the infrastructure that can go around it. So right now we're partnering with them in terms of learning, cross-exchange of a legal understanding. So that's the legal service part. We also understand now how the innovation will work there. So I say you take the CPU and plug it into different motherboards across the continent. So it will work well in some areas, and others it will need stronger platforms to operate.
I like that, sort of like a human-centered approach.
Exactly.
You have the core, but you need to fit it into what's the environment around. Lastly, how do you measure success individually? You as Michael?
Oh, me as
Yes.
Michael? Okay.
And what are the key takeaways you would give to a social entrepreneur starting out right now?
Okay, that's a question that requires a bit of reflection. But personally, I measure success in terms of how I went hard, how hard I went for the goal that I have set. And it's important because success is relative. Success might be achieving the numbers you have put on paper, and you can do that. Success might be changing the lives of other people, or even your own self, changing your life. So I personally measure success in terms of what kind of effort you put into the goal, and if you can genuinely measure that internally, you would know that you've been successful or not. And therefore, in terms of advice to a start-out or startup that's going out, I think one of the key takeaways I've learned on this journey is clarity of purpose, and many people do not maybe pay attention to that earlier on, which is fine. But if I had hindsight, I think the clarity of purpose to what we're doing came maybe 4 or 5 years down the line. So it's okay to innovate. In the morning, you could wake up and have a brilliant brainwave and start something. And it's important to test it and just fiddle with it without interruption. At some point, you're going to understand what is this that I'm doing and what is it going to achieve at the end. That's when you have something like a BHAG. That's when you have a vision that is meaningful. And then using that vision, it has to be your North Star. You begin to build what your measures for success are. So we utilize our BHAG as Barefootlaw, which is 50 million people across Africa by 2030. And that's our North Star. Everything that we're doing, it matters very little what the external stimulus is. If it doesn't affect our BHAG, we probably don't respond to it. So as an innovator, once you have clarity of purpose, it will help you get rid of noise around you. It will help you have focus. You will attract the right kind of team. You will build the right kind of relationships. You'll also start to attract the kind of funding that you want for the work you want, or build revenue streams that are meaningful to your end goal. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael, and it's been a pleasure being with Barefoot. As here, we would like to congratulate you guys for doing an awesome job in terms of the outreach you're doing and the legal services you're providing to the people who can't afford. And I think it's a testament to you guys' journey, and we're just wishing you all the best.
Thank you very much. And our relationship with Hill is hand in hand, and we're proud of it.
Okay.
We're proud of our relationship.
Thank you.
Yeah.